Supreme Court, which is being applauded by voting rights advocates and Louisiana Democrats.
As Sabrina Wilson reports, they think the High Court's decision will lead to a second majority African-American congressional district in the state.
That today is about the people and the power of people.
Ashley Shelton is executive director of the Power Coalition for Equity and Justice, which went to court to fight the new redistricting map approved by Louisiana's Republican-controlled legislature. And now the U.S. Supreme Court has lifted its hold on the Louisiana case.
Even as we know we have to go through a trial, but we do know that based on the court's ruling in the Alabama case, that indeed we're well on our way to realizing a second minority district.
The High Court recently struck down a redistricting map in Alabama.
The same legal framework that applied to Alabama, we expect to apply to Louisiana. So we're very hopeful in the outcome here in Louisiana.
Senator Royce Duplessis was among the Democrats in the legislature who fought to have a second black majority district added.
So we're very confident by fall of 2024 there will be 2 districts that candidates of choice can be chosen by African Americans in this state.
GOP State Senator Sharon Hewitt chairs the Senate and Governmental Affairs Committee and oversaw the redistricting efforts on the Senate side in 2022. Fox 8 asked for an interview with Hewitt, but she sent a statement saying she respects the judicial process and the Supreme Court's decision to return the map case to the Fifth Circuit. And further, she said Louisiana's congressional maps were passed by a supermajority of the legislature and comply with the law. She said, "We look forward to having our day in court and ultimately moving beyond litigation so we can return our focus to helping the people of Louisiana." Democratic Governor John Bel Edwards, who vetoed the redistricting map passed by the legislature, said Louisiana can and should have a congressional map that represents our voting population, which is 1/3 black. As I have consistently stated, this is about simple math, basic fairness, and the rule of law. I am confident we will have a fair map in the near future.
This has been an important, piece of a puzzle, because redistricting is about power and who has it, who can elect candidates of choice.
If Louisiana does indeed end up with a second black majority district after the legal fights are over, what would that mean to the current members of Congress representing the state?
What's at stake here at the end of the day is whether there will be an additional likely Democratic seat in the U.S. House of Representatives, which would take one away from Republicans in the state.
We also asked to interview AG Jeff Landry or his Solicitor General today. However, we got a statement from Assistant AG Angelique Friel saying our job is to defend what the legislature passed, and we trust the Fifth Circuit will review the merits in accordance with the law. Now, our political analyst Mike Sherman also agrees it looks like Louisiana will get another black majority district. Congressman Troy Carter, the only Democrat in Louisiana's congressional delegation, said today the Supreme Court was on the side of justice, and he said in a healthy democracy, fair and equitable representation matters. Rob?